I've witnessed people wearing clothes that you wouldn't normally associate with their gender. Wow, bro. Wow. Yes, I too have seen the photograph of Kurt Cobain wearing a dress. Soft medical is when pills. Hard medical is when choppy.
The earliest recorded trans person lived in 2900 BCE.
The male skeleton was found in a suburb of Prague, buried in a manner previously only seen for female burials. That doesn't mean that they're trans. When I hear valid, these days I think cult. Actual gender is the gender you feel you are internally. Is that not a circular definition? So what's gender then? How am I supposed to listen to any of this? Listen to him talking about how gender has variance and stuff, when there's no definition of gender.
Endocrinologists could not find a single case where a trans man brain scan did not match a cisgender male brain scan. The same goes for trans women.
They were saying they were taking some form of HRT. How much is that affecting their brain then? Because yeah, you look at one or two studies that confirm something and don't show anything else. You're promoting very, very biased material. And it makes me irritated that I complimented them, sort of suggesting there was bias in the other direction.
I love you, Mary.
So yeah, I wanted to look at this. The Science of Being Transgender, Powered by Rainbows. I've watched Powered by Rainbows before. I've never been impressed by this person's channel. I've never been impressed by their takes. I think they do kind of push a lot of the cult stuff. I always live in hope. Maybe we'll find a video by them that actually says something good, says something interesting. But hey, we've got, today we're explaining the basics of the transgender community. Yikes. So, explain that everyone is polyamorous and everyone is far left. I guess that's a joke. Who knows? From the 5,000-year-old history, this is dangerous. We're applying a very modern concept to history. There's a time that we weren't alive, a time that we don't necessarily understand. Might as well skip to about 8 minutes. How so? I mean, I'll see what the start of it is, and if it's really redundant, I can skip through. What it means to grow up trans. Scientific studies proving it's valid to be trans. There's no proof from studies. Studies are evidence, they're not proof. Unless every single study is coming out with 100% success rates, 100% this, that, or the other, there's no proof of almost anything. But yeah, let's have a look. Transgender Science 101.
Welcome to Transgender Science class.
What's this iMovie music? I love it. Brings me back. This is like something I expected in like a video in like 2008 or something.
Be sure to check out our transgender pins, pronoun buttons, and fundamentals of being transgender course at professorpry.com. Transgender is a term used to describe someone whose gender identity does not correspond to their sex assigned at birth. Though this typically means someone describing themselves as male to female or female to male, sometimes seen as MTF or FTM respectively, transgender is also a blanket term used to describe many other identities. This includes, but is not limited to...
I take issue with this. I really think trans should mean one to the other. You know what I mean? Like, the thing with these blanket terms or umbrella terms, what you end up with is you've got transgender, which is an umbrella term, and then beneath that you've got non-binary, which is another umbrella term, and then above that you've got queer, which is another umbrella term, and above that you've got the acronym LGBTQA+, whatever, that includes queer, which is a umbrella term, and then another umbrella term, which is also part of the acronym. It just gets a bit ridiculous. I think it's much better for terms to mean quite specific things, and that transgender or transsexual should mean going from male to female or female to male. And then this identity stuff really should, like call that queer or something. I think that'd be much easier, quite frankly, because I don't care about queer.
Non-binary, meaning someone who describes themselves.
Yeah, because this is just self-identity stuff. And like, transgender begins at identity, for sure. But I think if all you're going to do is describe it as identity, then functionally it's meaningless, because anyone can just take on that identity, take on a role that arguably shouldn't be taking on. And that's all they need to do. And then it gives rise to these people that can go into Korean saunas and get their dick out in front of women. And the staff are going to be like, oh, there's nothing we can do because we don't want to get sued for discrimination or something. There's a lot of problems there. I think having it defined as like one to the other is a much better term. So I don't like the definition. If this is the real definition, then I take issue with the real definition. That's how I'd put it.
As not of the gender binary of male or female. Gender fluid meaning someone whose gender identity changes over
Gender fluid to me, this is like completely natural. Like your gender expression and the way you feel about yourself, how you relate to your own gender, that is going to change over time. You get girls that are very tomboyish in school and then end up quite feminine. Like the reverse. You get gay people who are extremely flamboyant when they're younger and then kind of grow out of, well, not grow out of that, but they change out of that and become less so. Like, I think when we start calling things gender fluid, we're kind of pathologizing to an extent things that are very normal and really don't need like labels like this because it's just part of existing. You know what I mean? And like not of the gender binary of male or female. This is another problem here. Not of the binary of gender, not of the gender binary of male or female. Male and female are sexes. Gender is derived from sex, and it's to do with the societal, cultural kind of aspects of that. If you were to delete sex from existence, gender would go with it, necessarily. And male and female are not genders, they're sexes.
themselves as not of the gender binary of male or female.
And the other thing is, well, what does that functionally mean, other than just calling yourself a thing? I was watching a thing about non-binary yesterday. I wasn't convinced by anything. And one of the problems was the people would only ever talk in terms of what they're not. Things like, I'm not a man and I'm not a woman. Well, what are you then? And like complaining that language doesn't express that kind of thing. It's like you can still find ways of, like there must be a way of expressing how you actually feel, what you actually would pin yourself as. And if you're just saying you're neither of them, well, the problem is people are going to defer to your sex then. People are going to go by your sex terms, like your sex traits, sorry. They'll hear your voice, they'll look at you, and that's what they'll make a judgment as. And there's really not much you can do about that. So I don't really see the use of a lot of these terms. People like talking about social utility, and there isn't any, in my opinion. Like you might feel better, you might feel like something describes you, but you're you regardless. Nothing has changed. If you're trans, at the very least you want to change things. So I would include like you identify as something, you have the desire to change things. I'm fine with that factoring into the definition of trans for sure. I'm still looking for that man feeling I'm supposed to be feeling as a man. Yeah, that's the thing. What does it mean to feel like as a male? What does it mean to feel like as a female? You just are those things. There's not a feeling attached to either of them. You might not like being a male. You might not like being a female. You might express your gender as kind of a rejection of one or the other, or both. But you're still kind of influenced by your sex, you know what I mean? You're still expressing the gender binary, even in a negative way, you know?
Gender fluid, meaning someone whose gender identity changes over time, and agender, meaning someone who describes themselves as not having a gender. Though the term
not having a gender, I mean, that can just be normal as well. You just don't feel very strongly about any gendered things. That's just normal, again. People are like that. I think even categorize it, make it more flat than it is. A tomboy still has most of the feminine traits, they're just less prominent. Well, yeah, and it's different for everyone, that's the thing. Like, these terms kind of necessarily have to be broad and fairly meaningless, otherwise they're not describing many people, or they're just describing completely normal things.
The term transgender was coined in the 1970s. Trans people have been around since the dawn of humanity. In fact,
trans people have been around since the dawn of humanity. I take great issue with that. Listen, he said it himself, hang on.
Gender. Though the term transgender was coined in the 19...
Yeah, it was coined and refers to a fairly specific, refers to a fairly specific concept that has come up in Western countries in recent times, because things like hijra, etc., is not the same as trans. Ladyboys in Thailand, not the same as trans. Those people still call themselves men. They don't identify as anything, or identifying as anything different. Oh, thank you, Howard G. It's good to see you. So yeah, it's a very dangerous thing. What we're doing is taking a modern concept and applying it to a world that we don't live in and that we don't really understand all that well. We don't really know all that much about how these people live their lives. And so it's a bit arrogant, quite frankly, to decide that we know what they were and we're going to refer to them as that. Like, you don't know what those people were and what they wanted and how they felt ultimately.
1970s, trans people have been around since the dawn of humanity. In fact, the earliest recorded trans person lived in 2900 BCE. And while this person may not have described themselves,
the male skeleton was found in a suburb of Prague buried in a manner previously only seen for female burials. That doesn't mean that they're trans. That doesn't mean that they were what we today call trans.
As trans 5,000 years before the term was coined. Trans people have been around since the dawn of humanity. Describe themselves as trans. The earliest recorded trans person lived in 2900 BCE, and while this person may not have described themselves as trans,
they might not have described themselves as trans, so they didn't describe themselves as trans. But according to these people, trans is about identity. It's about identifying as a different gender to what your gender is, you know what I mean? Or to your sex. So doesn't that fly in the face of your definition? So why are we calling this person trans then?
trans 5,000 years before the term was coined. They were buried according to their gender identity, not their sex.
They were buried according to their gender identity. Well, how do we know that? All we know is that they were buried in a way that normally women were. That doesn't mean they identified as a woman. Like, what evidence do you have other than that?
Assigned at birth. This means the people in 29.
Like, perhaps he took on a different role to most males for one reason or another, and so was kind of seen that way. That's not what trans is. That's not what trans means. This is what I mean. We shouldn't be applying these modern ideals to ancient people. We don't understand how they lived their lives. We're looking at literally the way someone was buried. That could mean a whole lot of different things. Oops, excuse me, something is popping up. Why? Is there a specific reason? There we go.
900 BCE respected a person's gender identity even after death. Some other important terms to know.
We haven't shown that.
For this science class include perceived gender, which describes the gender other people may perceive you as when they first meet you.
I mean, this is just part of gender. Like, gender is like the social, cultural things, you know what I mean? Early recorded trans people, who's recorded as what? Always no data, just saying it makes it true. Yeah. His standard for evidence is concerning. Who was telling me to skip to 8 minutes? Like, are you kidding? This is fucking gold. I'm like, this guy is proving my point for me.
Actual gender, meaning the gender you...
Actual gender. The gender you feel you are internally. Like, it kind of begs the question how they actually, how they define gender. Actual gender is the gender you feel you are internally. Is that not a circular definition? So what's gender then? I haven't seen a definition for gender anywhere. If the actual gender has the word gender in the description, the definition, then what's gender? Like, how can you feel you are a certain gender? And what does that actually mean in any way?
Feel you are internally, gender dysphoria.
And like, if it's just what you feel you are internally, has that come up naturally? Has that come up just from existing? Or is that something you've decided? You know what I mean? You've decided that you're this, that, or the other based on external factors. Your gender identity is very malleable to outside influences, for sure. And all of this makes me wonder why it's a protected characteristic and why we're basing so much so heavily on this, other than that it's unfalsifiable and that whatever a person says they are is what they are, which you'd need to bring a lot more than this to convince me that we should see someone as what they say that they are.
Which describes a person's distress when their perceived gender doesn't match.
And we're still using the word gender without having actually defined it. Like, their perceived gender doesn't match their actual gender. This isn't even how people usually put it. Usually it's your gender identity doesn't match your sex. And I don't know. I don't use either of those definitions. I think gender dysphoria is just unhappiness with your gender or sex. I don't think there's any more to it. There's nothing to do with your gender identity, any of that shit. You don't like that you're a male. You don't like that you're a female. That's all there is to it, in my opinion. It makes much more sense.
Their actual gender and gender euphoria, meaning their happiness when...
I'm not convinced by gender euphoria either. It seems mostly a thing that female to males who have just started T are experiencing because that's a side effect, it turns out. You feel like you can take on the fucking world, etc., etc. Not something you'd naturally get as a female. You know, the feeling from testosterone, rather. And like, I don't know. If someone doesn't experience gender euphoria, what does that actually mean? You know what I mean? Rubble of Empire's video series called Origin of Patriarchy claims decently well why most of the third sexes around the world are males taking on different social role. I'll have to have a look at that. Yeah, it sounds interesting. Thank you.
when their perceived gender matches their actual gender. So how does being transgender work?
Okay, so we have a circular definition for, what was it? Actual gender. What your actual gender is circular. Nice. And instead of clearing up what actually gender means, what gender is, when we're saying it's different from sex, because you have to say it's different from sex, there's a huge problem here already.
A person's gender identity is determined long before they're born. We know that a person's sex is determined by their father's sperm cell when it meets their mother's egg in the womb. But that's when scientists have discovered the brain and the body of the fetus can go in two different directions on gender. Your gender is determined by your brain, not your genitalia. After a child...
Oof. That's actually quite a contentious claim in trans circles. Many of them reject these brain studies and things like that.
The fetus can go in two different directions on gender. Your gender is determined by your brain, not your genitalia. After a child is born, most times they begin to experience their actual gender identity between the...
And don't forget, we still haven't actually described or defined gender.
ages of 3 to 8 years old, though it could begin much later in life. This goes for all children, not just trans kids. But for trans kids, this comes in many forms, from feeling like the genitalia they were assigned at birth doesn't feel right, feeling like they want to wear different clothing, or feeling like their name or pronouns people address them by are hurtful to hear. Once a child shows signs of this gender dysphoria and feels like they might be transgender, there are two types of transitions available for them. Children under the age of 8 years old in the United States and many other countries are limited to social transition only. Social transition includes coming out of the closet to yourself in the mirror, your friends, family members, and others. There is no
Coming out of the closet at the age of 8. Sorry, though, I think there was something here that I missed.
The brain and the body of the fetus can go in two different directions on gender. Your
how does he show any of this?
gender is determined by your brain, not your genitalia. After a child is born, most times they begin to experience their actual gender identity between the ages of 3 to...
Experience your actual gender identity. I don't believe that at all. How do you experience your actual gender identity? And your gender identity, another thing is, actual gender is what they said earlier. Now it's gender identity. The terms are getting, mixed up so fucking much. It's quite confusing, even. I don't understand any of their definitions, because their definitions are, circular. We use the word gender in these definitions, and then don't say what gender means. Well, gender can't just mean sex. You know what I mean? None of these people believe that gender and sex are the same thing. You can't. Because then gender and sex mean fucking nothing if you're just, you're something else, you know what I mean? Isn't gender a social construct? How is this making any sense? Here's the best way that I can think to describe it, in my own words. Sex, obviously, is your reproductive role, or what should be your reproductive role. Obviously, things go wrong. You might end up infertile. You might have a DSD of some kind where overwhelmingly you are either meant to be one sex or the other, or you still actually are, but there's some differences. That's sex, sorry. To me, gender is the cultural and social aspects of sex. You know, what things are more associated with which sex, you know what I mean? So things like clothing, fashion, things like that are gendered. Because obviously something like fashion is gendered, because men and women are different shapes, overall. My actual identity gender. yeah, Jesus. But yeah, experiencing your gender identity. Gender identity is very malleable from outside forces. You might experience something that completely fucks up the way that you perceive your own gender. You know what I mean? That's arguably what happened to me. People transition because of things like trauma, because they have something like autism that makes all this shit seem incredibly alien to them, and they don't really understand why there are certain expectations of them as a male or a female. There's so many different things to talk about, or to think about, rather.
To 8 years old, though it could begin much later in life. This goes for all children.
And I don't know, there's a science tab here, so I guess I'm going to have to wait for the actual justification for any of this.
Not just trans kids, but for trans kids, this comes in many forms, from feeling like the genitalia they were assigned at birth doesn't feel right.
That doesn't mean they're trans. There could be all sorts of reasons why you don't like your genitalia.
Feeling like they want to wear different clothing, or...
That's gender nonconformity. Gender nonconformity is not gender dysphoria. Not at all.
Feeling like their name or pronouns people address them by are hurtful to hear. Once a child...
Again, doesn't mean that you have... that might mean gender dysphoria to an extent, but...
feeling like they want to wear different clothing, or feeling like their name or pronouns people address them by are hurtful to hear.
And you're assuming that that's gender. Like, maybe it is, but that doesn't make them the opposite sex. And I don't know what to say about the opposite gender, because gender is poorly defined here. To me, there isn't. Like, gender isn't really something that you add up. Like, that's what sex is. You've got one and the other. Gender is like a social construct around all that shit. I don't think there are like a number of genders. I think there's just the experience that each person has, you know what I mean? And that changes due to all sorts of stuff.
Once a child shows signs of this gender dysphoria and feels like they might be transgender, there are two types of transitions available for them. Children under the age of 8 years old in the United States and many other countries are limited to social transition only. Social transition includes coming out of the closet to yourself in the mirror, your friends, family members, and others. There is no rush to coming out, as sometimes it's not safe in your family or area to do so. But
and you might be going through a phase, and you might realize that this isn't right for you. You might... all sorts of things.
Coming out, you might ask people to use pronouns or a chosen name to affirm your gender. You might start wearing clothing and getting haircuts to match your gender identity.
It all sounds very innocent, doesn't it? It all sounds very innocent. We leave out the part where we make out that anyone that doesn't agree with any of this is a terrible person.
These are all forms of social transition, and they are all completely reversible with no side effects and zero harm.
They're reversible, but they load the dice. If you go down this route, you're more likely to go down further routes that are less and less and less reversible the further you go. Puberty blockers, less reversible than social transition. HRT, less reversible than puberty blockers. Surgery, I shouldn't even have to explain.
Harm done to the child.
And like, telling people that you are this, and then doing stereotypical gender roles. Like, I don't know.
This social transition period also plays a key role in allowing the child to understand their gender more before any other steps are taken. Some parents
understand their gender. Well, Jesus, don't watch this if you want to understand your gender. Like, I don't even know what gender is. I don't understand gender with this video because it's poorly defined.
Parents might worry a child is just going through a phase, but this social transition period allows the child to test how happy they are, walking around with different clothes or makeup and being addressed by a different name. Studies have found when family members, friends, teachers, and others respect this social transition, the child has less anxiety, depression, and less harmful effects overall.
Studies have shown, US Department of Health and Human Services. So this isn't even from a study itself, just as research demonstrates. And the thing is, when you start affirming, it's going to be nerve-wracking, the idea of maybe going back. So you're going to get this like sunk cost fallacy. It's loading the dice is what this is.
Overall, when puberty begins at the age of 8 to 10 years old, this is the first time any medical transition could even be considered. Typically, it is around this age when the family helps their child seek help from a
soft medical. No, it's just medical. There's no soft about it. It's just medical transition.
The first time any medical transition could even be considered. Typically, it is around this age when the family helps their child seek help from a certified psychiatrist working specifically in transgender therapy. After months...
Oof. Bad idea. Bad idea. They will affirm anyone pretty much, from what I can tell.
Of therapy, this psychiatrist, along with their family doctor, could both prescribe a puberty blocker drug. It should be noted that while puberty blockers are very basically a pause button on your puberty, which...
Very basically a pause button. Like, yikes.
Could be unpaused at any time. Doctors warn patients and their guardians that these blockers may slow your physical growth, affect your height, and decrease your bone.
Okay, listen, I'll give them a compliment. We're not saying they're fully reversible. We're still calling it soft medical, though. That's weird. Don't call it soft medical. You're either medicalized or you're not.
Bone density, which may cause your bones to break more easily in the future. And doctors warn patients that the long-lasting effects of these drugs are still being tested to this day, just like any other drug on the market. Usually around the same age when puberty is taking effect, many trans children socially transition in other ways. These include trans men using binders to cover their breast.
Should we be pushing this? Like, you can do this. You're probably going to hurt yourself. The thing is, as well, you start binding, it's going to affect your breast growth, for sure. And, like, you stop using it, like you decide that you're not trans after all, that's gonna, you might have lasting effects because of what you've done with them. And then that's not to start with what they can do to like your ribs, like your bones and stuff like that. You're on puberty blockers. Well, I suppose you wouldn't be using one if you're on puberty blockers. Thankfully, because that would probably make the broken bones scenario more likely.
so they appear to have more of a masculine chest, and trans women use tight underwear, specially designed tape or gaffs to
Trans women, we're talking about like kids tucking and stuff like that. Come on. Ghoulish.
tuck their male genitalia to appear more female with tighter clothing. Sometimes when trans children are denied from using proper binders or underwear made to cover their chest or groin areas, they rebel and start using unsafe.
Yeah, they might do, but does that mean that you should therefore get them to like tuck or get them to like bind? I really don't think so. Because then, if they do go back on it, are you not like, have you not been complicit then on whatever the fuck happens to them from that? Blockers could prevent you from being able to have an orgasm. Yeah, potentially. We've seen the Marcy Bowers clip a few times. Hope you're good, Gillian D.
Methods like ace bandages or other elastic materials which could cause lasting harm. In the United States
So can binders.
and many other countries around the world,
Okay, not acknowledging that binders can cause harm. Amazing.
you cannot legally start the next step until the child turns 16 years old. You also need your parent or guardian's written permission, consent from your doctor.
So potentially, by the way, you're on puberty blockers for like 6 years. I'm sure there were like recommendations, and I've done this before, I haven't been able to find it. I'm sure there were recommendations out there that after 2 or 3 years, you really shouldn't stay on them. Like, you can start getting some quite serious like effects, you know what I mean?
And consent from your licensed psychiatrist to start hormone replacement therapy or treatment, otherwise known as HRT. These are very strict regulations because, unlike puberty blockers, hormone treatment cannot be reversed.
Unlike puberty blockers, like, nah, you already admitted that they're not necessarily reversible. And now you're saying they are? Don't know about that, bro. Don't know about that.
For men, this includes deepening your voice alongside vocal training and growing facial hair. For women, this includes developing breast and changing your body's shape. HRT can come in many forms, including a shot, pill, patch, gel, or an implant. Doctors warn patients that HRT can increase your risk of blood clotting, high blood pressure, mood changes, and liver inflammation. The most common side effect is a lowered sexual desire. All of these are reasons your doctor closely monitors anyone on these medications.
Well, they might be monitoring them, but like, are they not just pretty much going to say, yeah, that's fine, whatever happens? That seems to be what we're seeing over and over.
The benefits of puberty blockers and hormone treatment working in tandem include helping the person with emotional and social development by making them more comfortable in their body, helping combat
Also, give you a micropenis if you ever want SRS. Yeah, they have to have like other methods, like using the colon or something else.
depression, boost their self-esteem, and prevent the need from future medical transition. Once a person is over the age of 18 or over the age of 17 with parent or guardian consent, a transgender adult can consider further medical transition. They must have been on hormone therapy for a minimum of a year and get consent from their doctors and licensed psychiatrist.
What is this term? Hard medical so soft medical is when pills, hard medical is when choppy. I don't get it, man. I don't get it. Medicine is medicine, you know what I mean? Would be better if you said medical and then surgical, but I guess then you couldn't downplay it as much with the puberty blockers and stuff.
For men, they can consider top surgery to remove their breast, hysterectomies to remove their female reproductive.
Surgeries can happen before 18, by the way. Maybe not anymore. They certainly had been, and people were okay with it. Like, someone like this would have been okay with it.
Organs, phalloplasty to construct a penis using skin taken from other parts of the body, typically your thigh, and metoidioplasty to make your clitoris work more like a penis. For women, they can consider a breast augmentation to get implants.
I love you, Mary.
Based Mary. I'm so glad I found your streams, or the TRAs might have made me into a transphobe.
Thank you very much, Purple Nightshade. Thank you.
In their breast area, orchiectomy, tracheal shave to make their Adam's apple smaller, facial feminization to create more feminine facial features, and penile.
The facial feminization thing, yeah, nice. We have a very different attitude towards, well, we call it facial feminization surgery. It's not what you call it when it's a woman getting like plastic surgery on their face. We have very different attitudes towards it than women do.
Inversion vaginoplasty to create a vagina by inverting the penile skin. It should be noted that these surgeries can cost tens of thousands of dollars, which many insurance providers do not cover. Before any surgery, doctors will discuss with their patients the medical risk involved in any surgery. Because of these risks and cost, many transgender people decide to only socially transition, and even for those that begin medical transition with puberty blockers or HRT, most of them choose to never get any surgeries at all.
So most of them just do social transition. So it literally is just stereotypes then. It's just the exact same shit you can do if you're just gender non-conforming and still you're just male or female. So what's being trans then? Is it literally just calling yourself a thing? Like, that's what we've been trying to get away from. Because if it's just about identifying as something, why would it be medicalized? I feel like half of these are purely cosmetic. Yeah, most of it is.
All. No matter how a transgender person decides to transition, or how much social or medical transition they choose
You're always valid.
to undergo, their gender identity is no less valid than anyone else.
Gender identity is still scientifically valid. You didn't even You didn't even define gender identity. You defined actual gender and had the word gender in the definition. Like, amazing. Wow. Scientifically valid. Okay, so we're getting onto the science, so I probably shouldn't question this term. Although I still want to know what these people think valid means exactly. When I hear valid these days, I think cult. Because all I hear is just, you're valid. Everyone's valid. You're all valid. Like, what do you even mean when you say that anymore?
But you might ask, what lets us know their gender identity is valid according to science? Well, in February 2015, the first unbiased study began on trans people to find what causes identity is valid according to science. Well, in February 2015, the first unbiased study began
Unbiased? The first ever study that wasn't biased was done in 2015? What does that mean? What's an unbiased study?
valid according to science. Well, in February 2015, the first unbiased study began on
Unbiased study? What is he saying there?
trans people to find what causes them to be trans. Previous studies had a bias of either trying to find a cure for being
How do you know this? Like, how do you know in any one case what they were trying to do? That's extremely cynical. That's extremely... Like, like, we're trying to reach into people's heads. We're telling people simultaneously that anyone that says they're a certain gender, that's what they are and it must be respected. But then you look at someone else and you'll tell them how they're thinking. It doesn't make any sense. Either you can reach into people's heads and therefore anyone can disagree with your gender identity if they want, or you shouldn't be fucking telling people that no, actually you're just doing this because you think this. This is nuts.
trans funded by a hate group or a study funded by a trans nonprofit setting out to find evidence to support their cause.
Okay, well at least we're like both sidesing this, I guess. But I mean, the studies still say what they say. You shouldn't invalidate them just because they were coming from the fucking ACLU any more than because they come from what you're calling a hate group, which I don't trust your definition of hate group by a mile, but okay.
Study funded by a trans nonprofit setting out to find evidence to support their cause. Head of Department Clinical Staff Physician and Clinical Researcher at the Department of Endocrinology at Ghent University Hospital in Belgium, Professor Guy T. Choon, conducted a study titled the European Network for the Investigation of Gender Incongruence, also known as ENEGY. His researchers followed 2,600 transgender participants who were all taking hormone medicine throughout the study.
So we can reject all studies before 2015, so most of the ones the TRO rely on then. Yeah, there we go. We're calling them biased, so by this guy's logic. And hey, there is a couple of points here where I will say that he's a little more honest than how a lot of people talk about this. But hey, he'll mention that puberty blockers are irreversible and then treat them like they're reversible later in the video. So even then, there's a lot of problems with this video. A lot of contradicting circular definitions. This isn't actually helping validate trans stuff. Like, anyone that's not already primed to want to believe all this stuff, I feel like if they have any brains about them, they're not going to. They're going to see this for what it is.
Study and undergoing brain scans using MRI machines.
By the way, why is it that no one ever gets their brain scanned when they're going through a transition? I didn't get my brain scanned, and I transitioned after 2015.
To determine how happy the person is. This gave doctors and scientists.
To what extent can you determine how happy someone is based on brain scans? It can show activity associated with happiness. Does that mean, though, that it can show happiness? It's not quite the same thing. Not sure about this, but hey.
A literal picture of their brain, much like you can see an X-ray of your bones. The researchers also had thousands of cisgender participants undergo the same MRI study to record brain activity, and then they compared the scans with those of trans participants. From their 2000...
One thing else I'll say, like, depending on what it is, What makes you happy? What makes you sad? Is that like, does that mean it's innate? Does it mean that it's innate, or does it mean that you've taken on beliefs maybe? Who knows? There's many reasons why someone can be happy about something or unhappy about something, depending on like their circumstances and all sorts of things.
600 trans participants. Endocrinologists could not find a single case where a trans man brain scan did not match a cisgender male brain scan. The same.
Is that pre or post HRT? Wait, hang on. Well, I suppose it must be post, because like, how do you know that anyone's trans? Otherwise, it'd be nice if I could just find what I'm looking for straight away. Did I not put 2015? I'm sure I did. (2018). Like, why not? Has he linked it anywhere? Sources, Professor Pride, post. I need to find this actual thing. Wait, why is this? Welcome to transgender science class. Nasty. I don't know what this blue and pink stuff is either. Wait, how is this a source then? This is just a transcript. Okay, here we go. LGBTQ Nation. Like, fuck off with that. Wait, am I wrong? Was it 2018, not 2015? I'm being so stupid. Hang on.
Researcher at the Department of Endocrinology at Ghent University Hospital in Belgium, Professor Guy T. Choon, conducted a study titled the European Network for the Invest.
Or is that what the study's called? Okay. Like, these are like articles, not the actual study. Where's the actual study? I don't give a fuck what LGBTQ Nation thinks. Like, transgender kids' brains. Like, how would you even know that? How would you even know? This the one? Wait, no, this is something else. It shouldn't be this difficult to find. You put a source link. Like, where is it then? Where is it then? ScienceDaily.com. Excuse me. According to findings to be presented. This isn't the study. This is like a blog or something. Science News. This is a blog. This isn't about... So where's the actual study, though? This Julie Baker, not sure. Hang on. You have to be informed about things, which requires a substantial amount of time researching to have an accurate opinion. Yeah, true, yeah. So people are going to trust this kind of thing, which... Can you blame them? Not sure. See what this is.
Investigation of gender incongruence, also known as energy. His researchers followed 2,600 transgender participants who were all taking hormone medicine throughout the study and undergoing brain scans.
Wait, taking some form of HRT. So how do we know that the HRT is not making their brain more resemble the other sex? Bearing in mind your sex gets like washed with hormone, your brain gets like washed with hormones and shit like that.
Known as energy. His researchers followed 2,600 transgender participants who were all taking hormone medicine throughout the study and undergoing brain scans using MRI machines to determine how happy the person is. This gave doctors and scientists a literal...
This is actually going to crash my fucking computer, Jesus Christ. These shitty news sites, they're like unbearable. What are you trying to fucking do to me? Go away. And this is a Telegraph. Oh my god, where's the fucking study? Stop linking to other news sites. I don't care about news. So I think it's this Julie Baker. Oh my God, go on. Just stop. Just stop, please. Oh my God. Oh, I've looked this up before. Holy shit. All right, finally. Jesus Christ. I think it's the same thing. There we go. All right, so it was linked. It's the same thing by the look of it. Transgender brain scans are more like their desired brains, desired gender from an early age. So the problem is, if it's since taking HRT, then how do we know that the HRT is not what's making it resemble the other sex? Like, what did they look like beforehand? These studies don't show out gynophiles, androphiles, by the way. We already know that homosexual males have feminized brains. Yeah, the thing is, like, if you were to use, like, brain scans to see if someone's trans or not, would you be seeing if they're trans or not, or more likely to see if they're gay or not? You know what I mean? Why can't I see the whole study on this? Like, am I missing something? Am I being really stupid right now? Now investigate the role of hormones during puberty. Yeah, and this is like transmed shit as well. Gender dysphoria is transsexualism. Interesting. So there's a lot of trans people out there that don't agree with this, by the way. Investigated brain structure, those diagnosed with GD using magnetic resonance imaging. With prepubertal children. Like, how many of them are just gay, though? That's the thing. How many of them are just feminine? Does that mean they're trans? Not by itself, for sure. Supports hypothesis of a sex atypical. But, like, your one of your groups is just people that say that they think they're a different sex. I don't understand. Most current trans discourse stays away from the brain scan stuff. Yeah, it's... I don't know, it's so fucking complicated, and I can't seem to find, like, a full study on this. Like, what he's linked is, like, 3 pages long. That's odd. Planned Parenthood. And he'll mention, like, bias from other sources, but still use biased sources anyway. So it's like, well, it sounds like you accept one kind of bias more than another. Back to brain scans. I'd imagine that a depressed person requires greater positive stimulus to display happiness in the brain. Hey, maybe. I have a study on hand that found gynophile MTFs have brains much like heterosexual males. So yeah, how much are we just looking at gay people's brains and saying, yes, you're trans then? I'm really struggling to find anything concrete on this at all. I don't trust it very much myself. Oh my God, not properly cited. No, they're fucking not.
Picture of their brain, much like you can see an X-ray of your bones. The researchers also had thousands of cisgender participants undergo the same MRI study to record brain activity, and then they compared the scans with those of trans participants. From their 2,600 trans participants, endocrinologists could not find a single case where a trans man brain scan did not match a cisgender male brain scan. The same goes for trans women.
Yeah, so we don't know that these aren't like gay kids. We don't know. They were saying they were taking some form of HRT. How much is that affecting their brain then?
Trans brain scan matched perfectly with the brain activity.
And if this is the case, and we know this, Why are no one getting their brain scanned then? Because people don't want to know. They don't want it to be based on this. They want it to be based purely on identity. If you scan Monty, would you even find a brain? Ah, fucking hell. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? I think it's just a fucking Judith Butler book or some shit.
In their cisgender counterparts and did not match the brain activity of their biological counterparts. But one study doesn't prove much. Something cannot be proven until its results can be replicated. That's what Dr. Julie Baker from the University of Leeds.
Wait, so that's not even the same. Is that study even linked? Where does he link that study then? Oh my god, what is happening? What are these fucking things? Yeah, like, where do you actually find this, like, study then? I'm so, like, lost. Is it this one? Participants 2974 could be. And there's no links here. Like, I really feel like I'm being given the runaround here so much. But can I just look at it? Can I just see the study? Can I just look at it? Can I? Oh, I'm dying. Okay. Baseline start of hormonal treatment. So they're on fucking. They're on HRT. So how much of this is just the HRT affecting your brain? I don't see what we're being shown here exactly.
Did in May of 2018. Dr. Baker focused her study on 160 transgender children and teenage participants.
Like, how are we defining transgender children? Just by identity?
Not on any HRT or puberty blockers, rather than trans adults. She conducted the same MRI test, and her results were identical to Professor Guy T. Chun's energy study. She later said, quote, "Although more research is needed, we now have evidence that sexual differentiation of the brain differs in young people with gender.
Differentiation. Listen, I don't speak very well either.
Differs in young people with gender dysphoria, as they show functional brain characteristics that are typical of their desired gender. As a result," she says,
I'm extremely suspicious of this. You say you are something and then suddenly your brain matches. It just doesn't... I don't know, man.
quote, "We will then be better equipped to support these young people instead of just sending them to a psychiatrist and hoping their distress will disappear spontaneously." Other doctors and endocrinologists around the world who have reviewed the data from both studies say the brain scans show some people are somewhere in between both male and female, sharing characteristics of both.
Gender exists on a spectrum. And we're not talking about sex, by the way. Like... It's so confusing. We need to concretely define fucking gender. How am I supposed to listen to any of this? Listen to him talking about how gender has variance and stuff. When there's no definition of gender. When you use actual gender, which I think he means gender identity, and it's a circular definition. So I don't even know what he thinks gender is. Like, we can't be saying it's the same as sex.
We've defined the space on the gender spectrum as non-binary or gender fluid, but with this data, it proves...
I think this is silly. Like, this whole thing here is silly. No one is 100% masculine or 100% feminine. Everyone has different proclivities that match more with one sex than the other, that match more with the opposite sex. Like, I'm just, I don't know. The thing is, I don't know that I'm equipped to really, like, push back on this effectively, and it's really frustrating. Hormone naive at baseline, about to start with hormonal treatment. What is a gender spectrum? I don't fucking know. I don't think there is one. I think gender is simultaneously like socially constructed and innate, and it's what you know you really are, but like how can you know what you really are? Like no one knows who they really are. They just fucking guess. It's nuts. This whole thing is nuts.
Proves their gender identities are just as valid as well. The best part of science is that
We haven't proved any of that. There's so much additional reading and additional knowledge you need to understand this. It's on purpose. Yeah, it probably fucking is. Let's be real. I'm fucking hell, man. I regret looking at this because I feel like I know that so much of this is extremely faulty, and half of this is stuff that transgender communities roundly reject. But at the same time, like, I need someone. I need to find people who know more about this shit than I do. I need to find people that are better at reading studies than I am, and that can help me understand this shit. I mean, we can look at, like, people are going to say bias, like transgender trend, whatever. Yeah, and I mean, one of the things is that brains are only so, like, sexually dimorphic. And part of how they, like, end up is to do with, like, your cranium size and stuff. Males have bigger brains. I linked a few articles on Discord. Oh, thank you. What's by sex? Okay, let me have a look at this real quick. Gender dysphoria suggested to be a consequence of sex atypical cerebral differentiation. We tested this hypothesis, MRI study, voxel-based something or other, Jesus Christ. MTF transgender, larger GM volumes than HEW, heterosexual women. Okay, I'm slowly getting the hang of it. In the cerebellum, present data do not support the notion of that the brains of male to female transsexuals are feminized. I'll just see if I can. Oh, why is that the same thing again? I don't have access to this article. How nice. How nice. We're suggesting that transsexuals follow heterosexual male patterns, assuming that transsexuals were heterosexual male at the time. Both male groups had smaller hippocampal volumes than heterosexual women. As in heterosexual men but not women, right cerebral hemisphere thalamus volume was larger in MTFTR than the left. Then these measures differed between heterosexual males and transsexual MTFs. MTFs displayed singular features and differed from both control groups. Is that due to, like, kind of the unique thing of being, you know, male-brained but taking estrogen, maybe? Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if you're going to be honest, which this person I don't think is, to be quite honest with you, you'd kind of present other things saying that there's evidence that actually is more, like, to do with sexuality and stuff like that. Cerebral cortex. If there's just anything else. Because, yeah, you look at one or two studies that confirm something and don't show anything else. And don't show anything that suggests otherwise, then you're promoting very, very biased material. And it makes me irritated that I complimented them, sort of suggesting there was bias in the other direction. Because actually, I'm still being fucking manipulated. It's not this person being honest. He's just manipulating me. I don't like it very much. I don't like being manipulated. No one should. But the thing is, people get manipulated. And that sucks. A lot of confounding factors that make it complicated as brains are plastic. Yeah. Because a lot of the problems here are like HRT changes things as well. Sex gender difference of the brain are of high social interest because their presence is typically assumed to prove that humans belong to two distinct categories, not only in terms of gender, genitalia, differential treatment. Though there are sex differences in brain and behavior, humans and brains are comprised of unique... Excuse me one second. Ooh, that was horrible. Unique mosaics of features. Some more common than females compared with males, some more common other way around, some common in both. Human brains cannot be categorized into two distinct classes. So this one is suggesting that male and female brains is a fairly abstract term in and of itself. So I don't know. We've got merely studying a person's brain changes their brain. Hey, maybe. I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot to go through. This is a real blind spot of mine, to be honest. Like, I know that what I'm being presented here, there's really only so much going for it, if at all. And that how it's being presented, it's difficult for me to verify because I'm only finding like limited information on those actual studies themselves. Oh, so this is the human brain mosaic. Isn't the same one, is it? Oh, this might be. Was this 2015? Might be the same study that I've been looking at just now. Sex, gender, differences in the brain of high social interest. Are we? I think this is the same study, yeah. Well, the conclusion of this one. The lack of internal consistency in human brain characteristics undermines the dimorphic view of human brain and behavior and calls for a shift in our conceptualization of the relationships between sex and the brain. So this pretty directly contradicts what he's saying. Now, what I'm not going to say is that, that he's definitely wrong. What I'm saying is that there's evidence against what he's saying as well as there's evidence for what he's saying, that being what he has presented. You know what I mean? Knowing your brain is being studied is going to affect the outcomes. Yeah, quite possibly, yeah. People are saying that a lot. This is a bit of a blind spot of mine. I'm not a fucking scientist. I will accept that straight away. Do you know who else isn't a scientist? Fucking Professor Pride. So, hey, I don't know, man. If he can make these, like, crazy strong claims, I can at least present alternatives and be like, well, that's not all there is to it. You know what I mean? Specifically, we should shift from thinking of brains as falling into two classes, males and females, to appreciating the variability of the human brain mosaic. Yeah, so like, how can you say that someone has a brain that's more like a woman's brain or a lot more like a man's brain when it's so complicated, it's so non-binary? That's fucking ironic to say, isn't it? That's ironic as fuck to say.
And then they compared the scans with those of trans participants. From their 2,600 trans participants, endocrinologists could not find a single case where a trans man brain scan did not match a cisgender male.
Like, how does any one brain match any other brain? You know what I mean?
brain scan. The same goes for trans women. Every trans brain
Like, how can they matched? How does that work? And again, I still have a lot of concerns about it being like an HRT thing as well, because they mentioned that HRT was involved.
scan matched perfectly with the brain activity in their
And the way it's presented, like, we're missing so much info. Like, they still were the same, but then there's not very much evidence that brains are really very dimorphic in the first place. I actually know a neurology researcher who himself is an AGP, and he's done some interesting work in the field. Hey, listen, I'm happy to look at anything. The only problem I'm going to have is that my analysis is only going to go so far on this stuff because, like I said, I'm not a scientist. I don't claim to be one. I'm not a fucking neurologist. And the problem is, nor is this guy, but he's not really making it that clear that, that's the case. I'm almost certain he's simply lying, quite possibly. Listen, the problem is, it's so fucking annoying. There's every chance that any of these people that I'm watching are just fucking liars, but I have to pretend that they're not. Or I have to give faith that they're not. Because I guess at the same time, people can just look at me and say, oh, well, you're just lying. Lying about what? I don't know. I give my opinions on stuff, but like, fuck me. Anyway. It's a very frustrating... It's a very frustrating endeavor trying to debunk this kind of shit. But truthfully, we're not... What are we actually showing here?
cisgender counterparts, and did not
Also, sex is about reproductive biology, not how typical your brain is of your sex. That is true. And I guess that's why they slip by it by saying like gender and stuff. But like the concept of gender presented here was circular and meaningless. We didn't actually define it.
not match the brain activity of their biological counterparts. But one study doesn't prove much. Something cannot be proven until its results can be...
Yeah, and he's saying that because there's a second one that proves it, but then there's a lot of other research that suggests that this dimorphism doesn't even exist.
replicated. That's what Dr. Julie Baker from the University of Liège did in May of 2018. Dr. Baker focused her study on 160 transgender children and teenage participants, not on any HRT or puberty blockers, rather than trans adults. She conducted the same MRI test, and her results were identical to Professor Guy T. Chun's energy study. She later said, quote,
You can reject a claim without claiming the opposite. You can, but then it's like, well, where does that come from? Why do you think differently? And if I've got nothing, then it's like, well, that's going to look a bit stupid, isn't it? That's going to sound like perhaps my reasons for thinking differently are ideologically rooted or something. And to be fair, I personally would prefer that I have a reason for thinking things. You know what I mean? I'd rather not just say, oh, that's not true, when I'm not very well versed in this subject as it is, you know what I mean?
although more research is needed, we now have evidence
Yeah, it's evidence, not fucking proof, you liar.
that sexual differentiation of the brain differs in young people with gender
You know, field is compromised and you have to look at other fields to find the truth. Yeah, potentially. But I don't know. I'm not looking at other fields really. Like there's just a lot of people saying a lot of different things, and this is not enough proof. You know what I mean? There's just not enough here to say that your gender or sex is in the brain. I mean, your gender seems more part of your consciousness, which is not really quite the same thing. The result of a whole different bunch of things. I didn't eliminate femme-mask brains entirely, but it's way overstated. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, it comes from lots of different places. Anyone that says, oh, people transition for this reason, that's it, like, they're wrong. Like, there's different ways that people come to the same conclusion that they're trans, you know? And I don't think it's really so much to do with brains. Like, you've got people that have internalized homophobia. You've got people that have severe trauma that might have been to do with someone else of the same sex as them that causes them to what is it? To reject their sex. And like sometimes people will get therapy and realize it's not for them. That doesn't mean their brain's different. If we actually scanned every trans person's brain, are we going to say they'd match every woman's brain? Like, it's wild. It's really quite wild. And the worst thing is, what I'm getting is his presentation of this. I'm not getting what was it? I can't remember what his name was. Tijern, whatever. I don't know how to say that. We're not actually getting his research. I can't even fucking find it, quite frankly. I'm getting his version of it, saying that they match the other set, but like, no one's brain really matches each other. Isn't it more like your fingerprint? Like, everyone is unique? So I don't know, man.
Gender dysphoria, as they show functional brain characteristics that are typical of their desired gender. As a result, she says,
functional brain characteristics typical of their desired gender. I do not like this at all. I do not think that this is right. And it's frustrating when I don't have the words to say, what does a non-binary brain look like? Oh, man. Oh, this is so rough, man. This is so rough.
quote, "We will then be better equipped to support these young people instead of just sending them to a psychiatrist and hoping their distress will disappear spontaneously."
What does that mean? You generally have to go to a psychiatrist anyway. If they're in distress, they might have like a psychological problem. Don't know. I don't like this.
Other doctors and endocrinologists around the world who have reviewed the data from both studies say the brain scans show some people are somewhere in between.
Characteristics of both male and female brains. But we haven't really proven that male and female brains really exist. You know what I mean? This is just not how scientists talk. This isn't very scientific. Scientifically proves gender exists on a spectrum. What's gender?
Both male and female, sharing characteristics of both. We've defined the space on the gender spectrum as non-binary or gender fluid, but with this data, it proves their gender identities are just as valid as well. The
brain scans prove gender identity is valid. No, I'm okay. I'm okay for that, Chief. You can keep it. You can keep it. Stop lying to people. Stop lying to children. I think this person is a propagandist. That is my impression, like based on not just this video. I've watched other videos. And the worst thing is, you look at the comments and it's like, oh, this is so helpful. Oh my God, you're making me feel valid. It's like, he's saying what people want to hear. At 7-Eleven, we meant to say orchiectomy is to remove testicles, not facial hair. That's quite a difference. Your testicles and your facial hair are very different things, man. Yikes. And then science is more than just basic grade school biology. Who could have get, like, what? This is simply amazing. Oh, it's grim. I look at this kind of stuff. You really realize the magnitude of what you're looking at and what's in front of you. And that you're one person watching hordes of non-thinkers follow the leader wherever the fuck he goes. Even if that is off a cliff of bullshit. They say they have a female brain, but it always ends up being what they see in anime and porn. Yeah. Hope you're good, Claire Lobelia. There's also a non sequitur. A male's brain is always male because it belongs to a male. Yeah, true. Information supported by evidence. Oh God. Oh, I'm gonna get depressed. Listen. At least there's one sensible comment. Oh wait, that's me. That was me that put that there. Fuck's sake. Anyway.
The best part of science is that it is an endless endeavor of presenting a question, finding answers, and most times, finding more questions.
Finding answers. Like, science doesn't often find answers. It finds evidence for and against things. And the problem is, there's other things. There's other things that say otherwise. So yeah, there's evidence for this. There's evidence against this. So how are you saying that this means that this is real? This means that this must be valid. You know what I mean? It's like saying a 5'5" male has a female height. Yeah, I kind of agree there. Yeah. Like, how far are we going to go with this shit? Stop collating your awareness of man-made horrors beyond you. I'm sorry, I can't. It's my life now. I'm sorry. This is a compulsion at this point. I'm not as compelled as I used to be to dress up weird and draw shit all over my face. So I do this instead. I don't know.
To ask. So we concede that more studies should be done. More
unbiased studies should be done. What about unbiased fucks? What about biased fucks taking said unbiased studies and then throwing shit like this out? What about stuff that says the contrary, that you won't show? You're leading people to think a certain thing. You're leading people down the garden path. Like, you couldn't possibly explain in 13 and a half minutes all the nuances of all of this stuff. You can't. Arguably, you probably couldn't in like 13 and a half fucking hours. I don't know.
More evidence should be sought out, and more questions
They don't understand what the word theory means in science. Yep, true.
should be asked. But as for now, the science and data are pretty clear. If you
No, they're not.
asked me or many other researchers who have spent years looking at science and data are pretty clear. If you asked me or many other researchers who have
If you ask him or many other researchers, a researcher and a scientist are not the same thing, by the way.
spent years looking at this data, the concept of gender was
There's no point in telling us you've spent years looking at this data if you're trying to get to a specific conclusion. Like, oh my God. Joanna Olson Kennedy covering up her research. Yep, true. They will never touch any of that kind of shit. Because it's not about being honest. It's not about actually caring about any of this shit. It's just about, you know. Leah Thomas's Insta. Apparently they had a secret Insta. Like, I saw some tweets about it. It was pretty weird. Yeah, them saying it's pretty clear. This is not true.
put into a binary system because we years looking at this data. The concept of gender was put into a binary system.
But they're using like the binary system to say that it's not binary by saying that some people's binary brain is more like this part of the binary than this part of the binary. I don't fucking get it, man. It doesn't make sense. You're reinforcing the binary whilst also arguing against it. No? Am I missing something?
Because we allowed it to get that way. During World War II,
What?
women would wear men's clothing so they can help fight in the war. During the Renaissance, men would wear dresses and put on makeup to perform on stage, and no one saw it as an issue. And even
No one saw it as an issue. They probably didn't allow fucking women to act. What are you talking about?
would wear dresses and put on makeup to perform on stage, and no one saw it as an issue. And even 5,000 years ago,
And this we already know is bullshit. You're basing it on them being buried a certain way. How do you know that wasn't just a role that they took on? Maybe this particular person wasn't up to the task of whatever the men were doing around then, like going out to fight, going and hunting and stuff like that.
a woman's gender identity was respected by her community.
This is not true. You have not shown this. Like, this is completely irresponsible to claim. I'm like dumbfounded, man. I'm shocked.
Even after her death, even though her skeleton was male. I've witnessed thousands of people.
So you do know what sex is, and you do understand that there is a binary at play here, which you keep reinforcing to then say that it's not actually a binary, but what you're talking about is people going from one side of the binary to the other side of the binary. Oh my God, I probably need to make this into a video, but it's going to be a bitch to edit. I'm so fed up. I'm so fed up. I hate everyone. I don't. It's not true. I love all of you.
Over the years wearing clothing, shoes, jewelry, or makeup that doesn't match the gender roles society labeled them with at birth.
That's just gender nonconformity, bro. That's got nothing to do with anything.
Even though her skeleton was male. I've witnessed thousands of people over the years wearing clothing, shoes.
Sorry, I didn't catch this the first time round. I've witnessed people wearing clothes that you wouldn't normally associate with their gender. Wow, bro. Wow. Wow. Amazing. Holy shit. Yes, I too have seen the photograph of Kurt Cobain wearing a dress. Wow.
Jewelry or makeup that doesn't match the gender role society labeled them with at birth. Throughout my study, although less scientific than those I mentioned a moment ago, I could not find one person in those thousands who wasn't genuinely happy to live their authentic life.
What does this mean? Genuinely happy to live their authentic... You don't know these people. You don't know what happens behind closed doors. You don't know what goes through their head when they lie down and sleep at night. Oh my God, what is wrong with you? Why are you lying to people like this? Why?
Find one person.
Oh wait, I know why. Because it's how you make your fucking dollar. It's how you sell all your shitty fucking merch, such as Rainbow Egghead. Can we see this? Can we see this? Weird. What else have we got? Like, not much. It's the most capitalist thing fucking ever, by the way. I hope this guy doesn't fucking complain about capitalism. I mean, he did kinda in that fucking Pride video where he talked about how Pride festivals should just destroy their own budgets to cater for his fucking dumbass, you know what I mean?
Person in those thousands who wasn't genuinely happy to live their authentic lives.
That's meaningless. You don't know these people.
I've made dozens of terrific friends who don't conform to gender roles, and met I've made dozens of
Changing your name from a male name to a female name is conforming to gender roles. You're taking on a different gender and conforming to those roles. What are you fucking talking about?
terrific friends who don't conform to gender.
14-year-old trans youth activist as well. Oh, man. Oh, please, Danny Kill Cullen, please introduce you to me to your parents. So in a video game, I can slap them.
Roles.
In a video game, strictly, not in real life. I don't do violence.
And met some of the smartest people you'll ever meet.
I don't know who this person is. I don't trust this guy's definition of smart, though.
Who once upon a time questioned why they couldn't wear a dress. Though the thousands of MRI brain
Question why they couldn't wear it. Well, you can. You can wear whatever the fuck you want. That's the whole point. That's why it should be about letting men and women dress how they want and shit. As long as they're not hurting anyone. Oh, hi, Rachel. I'm sorry. I'm like soying out to fuck and I need to stop soon. But thank you for watching.
brain scans can prove being trans is valid according to science. No matter where
Valid according to science, which is not a scientific statement. So what the fuck are you saying?
your gender lands on the gender spectrum. To me, validity can
Yes, which you have repeatedly expressed as male or female. Amazing.
be a relative term. No one under the age of 17 is getting surgeries, and most
Is getting set. Well, it might be true now. You're in fucking Trump's America, bro. But it sure wasn't always true. It's happened like. Fuck me.
most trans people only ever socially transition anyway, so there's never any harm to kids.
There's never any harm to kids. You're a retard, bro. You know what you're talking about. Is it a harm to a kid if they go down a path that will mean later in life they can't have kids? I guess they weren't being harmed as a kid so much. But it's still a harm to them in their fucking life.
No one is coming home from school a different gender, and no child can use a bathroom or play on a sports team matching their gender identity without first spending years working with certified professionals and doctors.
This is not true, man. The NCAA is like, I think they've completely about faced and like they're just not down with the trans sports shit now. But like, it was like 1 year on HRT is all you needed to be like a male and female sports, which is not enough. I've seen evidence that even after 2 years, there's some strength retained. It might even go way further than that even.
Who agree with their gender identity. So if it makes someone happy to wear a dress and high heels, then you go, girl. But for those out there wanting their happiness to end, please know that coming out isn't someone's way of
No one wants anyone's happiness to end. What are you talking about?
asking your permission. It's their way of telling you the good news. It's not up to you how valid their identity is.
What? What does that even mean? What does it mean for an identity to be valid? What's an identity? What is valid?
It's only up to you how accepting you'll be, and we hope by learning from this episode, you'll make the right choice. If you'd like to support our show, check out
I'm thoroughly disgusted, grossed out. I need to leave a further comment. Not being abusive. I don't do abuse. I do criticism. But this is like, we're just lying to people. We agree men can wear dresses and heels, they're still men. Exactly. It's not hard. It's not hard. Anyway, fuck me. There we go. That was Professor Pride on science a non-scientist, talking bullshit, twisting evidence to make his shit seem more legit than what it is, and not acknowledging the plenty of evidence out there that brains just really aren't very dimorphic at all. Which, hey, I suppose if you really insist, albeit baselessly, that gender is based in the brain, surely that would be more affirming of there not being a gender binary. Because if gender's in the brain and brains aren't really binary, then there you go. Like, I feel like what we've had is a lot of using a binary to try and tear down a binary, which doesn't make any sense. You talk about gender not being a binary, and then all you're talking about is people that want to be the other side of the binary. That's still 1 and 0, you know what I mean? It's bizarre. It's so bizarre. Yeah, I don't know. Thank you all for watching. I need to stop now because I need to make food soon and spend time with Charlie and think about literally anything else than how utterly dishonest people that claim to be standing up for my rights are being. That man isn't even trans. Yeah. I don't know. Man. I don't know. I'll be okay. Don't worry. Don't worry about me. I don't take this shit to heart. It just bothers me. I don't like liars. I don't like propagandists. And everywhere I turn, when I look for like trans positive shit, that's all I see. Should there not be ways of pushing this kind of stuff or like encouraging gender nonconformity? You know what I mean? I don't fucking know. Anyway, I love you all. Thank you so much for watching. See you later. Bye.